The folder in Lena's hands had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases had gone soft. She smoothed it against her lap anyway. The waiting room was the kind of clean that felt hostile. White walls, no art, chairs that were expensive enough to look comfortable, but weren't. A single orchid sat on the reception desk, perfectly still, perfectly fake. Even the air smelled like money that didn't want to be touched. Lena had been sitting there for 22 minutes. She knew because she'd watched every one of them tick past on the glass clock above the elevator. She couldn't afford to waste time. Her brother's next hospital invoice was due in 9 days, and the one after that was already printed and waiting. She was not supposed to be here. She was a copy editor from a mid-sized publishing house that had quietly laid off a third of its staff 4 months ago. She was 31 years old. She had $214 in checking, and her younger brother Daniel had a tumor pressing against his spine that 2 different surgeons had described as time-sensitive. She was here because a recruiter had called her with an offer she'd almost hung up on. The assistant, young, immaculate, expression like a closed door, appeared without a sound and placed a single sheet of paper on the armrest beside her. "Please sign before Mr. Voss comes in." Lena looked at it. Non-disclosure agreement, standard boilerplate at the top, then language so airtight it practically hummed. She hadn't spoken to anyone yet. She didn't even know what the job was. She signed. Damien Voss didn't knock. The door simply opened and he was there. Tall, dark suit, no tie, the kind of man who made rooms feel smaller just by existing in them. He didn't sit. He stood at the far end of the coffee table, looked at her once, and she had the distinct sensation of being read, quickly, efficiently, like a document he was deciding whether to keep or shred. Before we take a closer look at this complex narrative, please hit the like and subscribe button to subscribe to this channel. Your support will help me grow this work and prepare a new story. He spoke without preamble. 30 days. You'll pose as my fiancé at 7 scheduled public events and be present at the residence as needed. You'll be briefed on background details, given a wardrobe allowance, and housed in my building for the duration. He paused. $50,000. Paid in full on day 30. Not before. Lena stared at him. The number sat in the air between them like a lit match. 50,000. Daniel's surgery. The specialist in Boston. The gap that no insurance would touch and no payment plan would bridge in time. She wanted to stand up and walk out. She wanted to tell this man, this cold, symmetrical, contractual man, exactly what she thought of being appraised in a waiting room like a piece of furniture being considered for purchase. Her pride was loud about it. Screaming, actually. But Daniel was 24 years old, and he couldn't feel his left hand anymore, and the window was closing. "Any questions?" Damien said. Lena looked down at the NDA she'd already signed. She looked back up. "Where do I sign?" Something moved across his face. So fast, she almost missed it. Not quite surprise, not quite satisfaction. Something in between that he shut down immediately. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a second document on the table. The contract was 12 pages long. She told herself it was a transaction. Clean, temporary. 30 days, and then she would take the money and never think about this room again. She was already lying to herself, and she hadn't even left the building. The contract had a table of contents. Lena noticed that first. 12 pages, and whoever had drafted it had taken the time to index it. Section 1, Public Conduct. Section 2, Approved Conversation Topics. Section 3, Physical Presentation Standards. Section 4, Residential Guidelines. She sat in the back of a car she hadn't been asked to enter so much as directed toward, the document open across her knees, and she read every word. She was a copy editor. Reading was the one thing in her life she had never been able to rush. Most of it was what she expected. Don't discuss his business dealings with outside parties. Don't initiate conversations with board members about anything financial. Maintain the appearance of... And she noted the careful legal distance in that phrase, the appearance of a committed romantic relationship in all public settings, eye contact, appropriate physical proximity, no contradicting him in front of others. There was a script, an actual script, typed, formatted, with suggested responses to common questions. How did you two meet? What do you love most about him? With Damien's pre-approved answers printed in one column and a blank column beside them labeled Approved Variations, Subject to Review. Lena read that page twice. Then she turned to page 7. One clause sat in the middle of an otherwise dense paragraph, and it stopped her completely. The party of the second part shall not develop, pursue, or express emotional attachment of a romantic or personal nature toward the party of the first part for the duration of this agreement. She stared at it. Then, quietly, in the back of a moving car, with the city sliding past tinted windows, she almost laughed. Almost. Because who builds that into a contract? Who sits across from a woman they've known for 11 minutes and thinks, I should protect myself legally from the possibility that she might feel something? A man who had been felt something for before. A man it had cost. She filed that thought away and kept reading. The penthouse was on the 34th floor, and it looked like it had been decorated by someone who understood beauty intellectually but had never needed to feel it. Everything was correct. The proportions, the palette, the quality of every surface. All of it impeccable, all of it immaculate, all of it completely without warmth. Art on the walls that had been chosen to match, not to move. Furniture that invited admiration more than use. Lena stood in the guest suite, her suite, apparently, and set her bag on the floor and looked around at a room larger than her entire apartment. A soft knock at the open door. The housekeeper was a small woman in her 60s with gray-streaked hair and the kind of face that had decided long ago not to waste expressions on people who hadn't earned them. She carried fresh towels. She looked at Lena the way someone looks at a road they've watched other people take before. I'm Rosa, she said. Dinner is at 7. Mr. Voss eats at his desk most nights, but he expects you to be available if he calls down. Calls down? There's an intercom by the bed. Lena nodded slowly. Rosa set the towels on the bench at the foot of the bed and moved to leave. Then she paused in the doorway, not turning fully around, just enough. The last one lasted 11 days, she said. Not unkindly, not cruelly, just factually, the way you mention the weather before someone goes outside without a coat. Then she was gone. Lena stood alone in the beautiful, cold room. She looked at the intercom by the bed. She looked at the 12-page contract still in her hand. Then she walked to the desk in the corner, sat down, and opened to page 1. If Damien Voss wanted a performance, she would give him one. But she would read every single rule first, because in her experience, the person who knew the rules best was always the one who knew exactly how far she could bend them. By day 3, Lena had the performance down to muscle memory. The way she tilted toward him slightly when someone addressed them both. Not touching, just angled, the body language of a woman who gravitated naturally toward her partner. The way she smiled at the right moment, laughed at the right volume, asked board members about their grandchildren and golf handicaps with the focused warmth of someone who genuinely cared and then filed every answer for later use. She had always been good at reading rooms. Editing had taught her that, the ability to walk into a piece of writing and feel immediately where the tension was, where the pacing sagged, what a reader needed before they knew they needed it. People, it turned out, were not so different from manuscripts. Day 4. A dinner at Aurelius, 60 covers, 3 Michelin stars, a table of European investors Damien had been trying to close for 8 months. Lena watched the lead investor's wife grow visibly bored 40 minutes in as the men talked numbers. She leaned across the table, asked the woman about the restoration project she'd mentioned in passing, and within 12 minutes had the entire table laughing. Damien signed the preliminary agreement before dessert. He said nothing on the ride home, but in the elevator, just before the doors opened, he glanced at her sideways. Quick, almost involuntary. The way you glance at something that surprised you and you're not ready to explain why. Lena looked straight ahead. Day 7. A charity gala at the Hartwell Museum. Black tie. Lena wore navy. She'd chosen it herself from the wardrobe allowance, ignoring the stylist's suggestion of safe, forgettable cream. Damien looked at her when she walked into the foyer, and something shifted in his jaw just slightly before he reset it. "You'll do," he said. "I know," she said. They walked in together. Day 9. A board meeting where she wasn't supposed to speak. She was backdrop, presence, the fiancé who sat in the corner chair and looked composed while serious men talked seriously. She sat. She listened. 20 minutes in, she slid a notepad across the table to Damien with 3 words written on it. Henderson hates Cartwell. She'd watched them for less than half an hour. The micro-expressions, the way Henderson's posture changed every time Cartwell spoke, the deliberate way he excluded him from any direct address. Damien looked at the note, then at her. Then he restructured the entire second half of the meeting, kept Henderson and Cartwell in separate conversations, and walked out with a unanimous vote. He didn't say thank you. But that evening, she found a book on her desk, a first edition of something she'd mentioned once, briefly, almost accidentally, in a conversation she hadn't thought he was paying attention to. No note. By day 10, she had stopped thinking of it as a performance. That was the first warning sign she ignored. The second came on day 10, a gala, larger this time, louder, the kind of event where old money and new money stood in separate corners and pretended not to clock each other. Lena was mid-conversation with a senator's aide when a hand found the small of her back. Light, brief, Damien steering her away from a conversation he'd decided was finished. It was in the contract. Appropriate physical contact in public settings. She knew that. Her spine didn't. Later in the evening, while Damien was pulled aside by a man in a gray suit, a woman materialized at Lena's elbow, polished, warm, the kind of effortlessly elegant that came from 70 years of never worrying about money. Margaret Harlow, wife of the Harlow Group's chairman. She'd been watching them all evening, Lena realized. She leaned in close, like she was sharing a secret at a garden party. "I've seen 4 of them, you know," Margaret murmured. "The others he brought to these things." Lena kept her smile perfectly in place. "Is that so? He's never looked at any of them like that?" Lena didn't ask what like that meant. She was afraid she already knew. "We're very happy," she said smoothly. "The approved script. Approved variation B." Margaret smiled. Not unkindly, the same way Rosa had smiled. The smile of a woman who had seen enough of life to recognize when someone was lying to themselves and had the grace not to say it outright. She drifted away. Across the room, Damien was watching Lena, not performing, not scanning, just watching. She turned away first. Professional, she reminded herself. This is a job, 30 days. You're a copy editor from a mid-sized publishing house, and you are here for Daniel and nothing else. She picked up a glass of water. Her hand was completely steady. She was an excellent liar. Always had been. The problem was, she was better at editing than lying, and some part of her brain, the part that lived in manuscripts and margins and the space between what was written and what was meant, had already started marking up the story she was telling herself. And the notes were not kind. Day 14 arrived the way midpoints always do, quietly, without announcement, disguised as just another day until it wasn't. The event was a foundation dinner, children's literacy, the kind of cause that made billionaires feel human for an evening and then go home unchanged. The ballroom was warm and gold-lit, full of people who smiled with their whole faces and meant about half of it. Lena was good at this now. 14 days in, and she'd developed what she privately called her event mode, a version of herself that was present, polished, and about 2 degrees warmer than her natural temperature. She could sustain it for 4 hours without it costing her much. What she had not prepared for was Marcus Voss. She heard him before she saw him. A laugh that filled the room without apology. The kind of laugh that had grown up never being told it was too loud. He was younger than Damien by maybe 4 years, broader in the shoulders, with the same dark eyes, but none of the armor behind them. Where Damien moved through a room like a closed door, Marcus moved through it like an open window. He spotted Lena from across the ballroom and came straight over with the confidence of a man who had never once doubted his own welcome. "So you're the one," he said, extending a hand and gripping hers with both of his. "Damien's, what are we calling it? Fiancé?" The half-second pause before fiancé was surgical. "Lena Marsh," she said, steady, warm. Approved variation A. "Marcus Voss." His smile was wide and didn't reach his eyes. "I've heard almost nothing about you, which with Damien means he's either very serious or very careful. Maybe both," Lena said. Maybe. He tilted his head, studying her with a frankness that was almost refreshing after 2 weeks of rooms full of people pretending not to assess each other. "Can I ask you something?" "You're going to regardless," she said. He laughed, genuine this time, surprised out of him. Then he stepped closer, dropped his voice just enough. "How much is he paying you?" The room didn't stop. The music didn't cut. Nobody turned to look. But something in Lena's chest went very, very still. She held his gaze. Didn't flinch, didn't color. She was still searching for the right version of a response, something that was neither confirmation nor denial, something from the contract's approved framework for hostile questioning by known associates, when she felt it.
A response hand on her back, not the brief directional touch from Galah's past. This was different, deliberate, settled, the full warmth of a palm placed with intention between her shoulder blades, and Damien was beside her. Close, his voice quiet and absolutely final. "Enough of that." He didn't raise it, didn't need to. There was something in those 3 words that had iron in them. Not anger exactly, but something older and colder than anger. Something that said, "This is where it stops." Marcus looked at his brother for a long moment. Something passed between them that Lena couldn't fully read. Old history, old damage. The specific fluency of 2 people who had grown up in the same wound. Then Marcus smiled. Lighter now, retreating behind charm the way people retreat behind furniture. "Just getting acquainted," he said easily. "Get acquainted with someone else," Damien said. Marcus raised his glass in a small, lazy salute and drifted back into the crowd. Damien's hand stayed on her back for 3 seconds longer than necessary. Then it was gone. Neither of them mentioned it. It was later, past midnight, the event finished, the penthouse quiet, that he knocked on her door. She opened it to find him still in his dress shirt, jacket gone, the top button undone in the way that, on any other man, would have looked casual, and on Damien Voss looked like a significant concession. He didn't come in, just stood in the doorway. "Are you okay?" 4 words. Simple, low, stripped of the careful architecture he normally put around everything he said. Lena looked at him. She had been asked that question before, by doctors in waiting rooms, by friends who meant well, by her mother in the months after the diagnosis, and she had always answered it efficiently. "Fine. Yes, I'm okay. Clean, fast, closed." But something about the way he asked it, without preamble, without the corporate distance he wore like a second suit, just the question sitting there plain and undefended, hit her in a place she hadn't known was unguarded. "Yes," she said, a beat. "Thank you," she added, and meant it. He nodded once, started to turn. "Damien." He stopped. She didn't know why she'd said his name. She hadn't planned to. The word had just come out, and now she had to follow it somewhere. "He does that often, Marcus?" Something moved through his expression. Brief, complicated, a weather system passing. "He tests things," Damien said. "Everything. Everyone. And if they break, then he has his answer." He said goodnight and left.
She couldn't sleep. At 1 a.m., she walked to the kitchen for water and took the long route back. Through the main corridor, past the study with its door left half open, the way it always was at night, as if the room were breathing. She paused without meaning to. The desk lamp was off, but the city light came through the floor-to-ceiling windows and fell across the room in long, pale strips. Everything in the study was ordered and deliberate. Books by subject, awards faced forward, files labeled. Except one thing. On the far corner of the desk, pushed back, almost behind the monitor, was a silver picture frame, face down, just lying there, face down, in a room where everything else faced forward. Lena stood in the doorway and looked at it for a long moment. She didn't go in. She didn't ask. But she understood. The way you understand something in your body before your mind catches up, that the woman in that photograph was the reason for the clause on page 7. The party of the second part shall not develop emotional attachment. Someone had developed it first. Someone had paid for it. And Damien Voss had built an entire contract to make sure it never happened again. Lena walked back to her room. She lay in the dark and listened to the city 34 floors below. The wall between them had not come down. But somewhere in the last 4 hours, in a 3-word sentence and a hand on her back and 4 quiet words at a doorway, it had developed its first crack. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself a lot of things at 1 a.m. There was no single moment it changed. That was the thing about slow burns. They didn't announce themselves. There was no line you crossed, no door that opened. There was just a gradual, quiet accumulation of small things that you kept filing under coincidence and professionalism, and it doesn't mean anything until the file got too heavy to carry. If this story got you, subscribe so part 2 lands straight in your feed. Drop a comment below. Do you think Lena is doing the right thing? I want to know what you think.